I haven't seen someone look so beautiful while reading in a long time, Mr. Clark said softly. I blushed. I looked down, unsure what to say. He added, Amanda, you deserve more than silence and neglect. You deserve to be cherished. And that's when he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was slow, careful, like he was asking for permission and pouring his heart into that single moment. And I kissed him back. I won't lie. I cried afterward. Not because I regretted it, but because I realized how long I had been starving for this, for attention, affection, appreciation. James hadn't kissed me like that in years. If I had waited for him to change, I would have waited forever. The woman who once waited by the door with a warm dinner, hoping for just one hug from James, she was gone. And in her place stood someone who had finally tasted what she deserved. Before I continue, let me use this opportunity to appreciate all of you for your support and time. Your comments and likes are engine that motivates me to even write more stories. Thank you so much. Now allow me to walk you through the deepest and emotional part of this story. I remember that night so clearly, as if it just happened yesterday. It was our wedding anniversary. 7 years of marriage. 7 years of me standing beside James, cheering him on, supporting his career, and praying for more time together. I believed in us. I believed in love. That morning, I woke up with a smile on my face. I had everything planned. I booked a small private table at a cozy rooftop restaurant, the same place we celebrated our honeymoon dinner years ago. I paid extra for the red roses, candles, and soft music. I even ordered 2 bottles of wine, one white, one red, because I wasn't sure which James would prefer that night. I wanted it to be special. I wanted him to look at me again, not just as the woman who did the laundry, cooked dinner, and slept beside him every night. I wanted to feel loved again. I wore the red dress James once said he loved. I had my hair done. I even sprayed the perfume he used to say reminded him of cherry blossoms. But then just 2 hours before the dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a text from James. Sorry, Amanda. Something urgent came up at work. Can't make it tonight. That was it. No happy anniversary. No I love you. Just work. I stared at my phone for a long time, hoping another message would come. Something to tell me it was a mistake. But nothing came. Still, I went to the restaurant. I sat at that beautifully decorated table, staring at the empty chair across from me. 2 wine glasses. One untouched. One held tightly in my hand. I was embarrassed, hurt, and angry. I blinked back tears, forcing a smile each time the waiter came to ask if I was ready to order. I told him I was waiting for someone. Then someone did show up, but it wasn't James. It was his boss. Mrs. Amanda? He said, surprised. What are you doing here all alone? I quickly stood, embarrassed. Mr. Clark, good evening. It's our anniversary. James was supposed to be here, but he couldn't make it. Mr. Clark looked at the table, the wine, the flowers. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and shook his head with a soft, disappointed sigh. Work again? He asked gently. I nodded. He paused for a moment. Would you mind some company, just for a bit? I was just leaving a meeting nearby. I hesitated but nodded. At least someone showed up. We sat down and talked. At first, it was small talk. He asked about my day, my hobbies, and what I loved most about anniversaries. I told him the truth, that I just wanted to be noticed, to be remembered, to be seen. He listened. Not the way people pretend to listen. He really listened. Then, to my surprise, he took out a small box from his coat pocket. This was meant for my niece's birthday next week, but something tells me you need it more, he said, placing the small silver bracelet into my hand. It sparkled under the candlelight. I was speechless. And here, he added, slipping an envelope onto the table. A little something to treat yourself. Inside the envelope was $5,000. Why? I asked, stunned. He smiled kindly. Because every woman who loves like you do deserves to feel special, even when others forget. I didn't know what to say. No one had ever done anything like that for me before. Not even James, not on birthdays, not on anniversaries, not even when I was in the hospital 2 years ago. Mr. Clark stood and said, "Come on, Amanda. Let me take you shopping. I think it's time someone reminded you how beautiful you are." For the first time in years, I felt like I mattered. We went shopping that night. I bought new shoes, a coat, a few dresses. I laughed more than I had in months. We didn't do anything wrong. Not that night. But something inside me shifted. Something broke, and something else began to bloom. When I got home, James was asleep on the couch, still in his work clothes, laptop open beside him. I walked past him, holding my shopping bags and the bracelet now shining on my wrist. He didn't even stir. I stood in the doorway for a moment, staring at the man I once adored. The man I gave everything to, and yet all I ever asked for was time. That night I knew things were changing. I didn't plan for it to happen. But when a heart goes too long without being noticed, it starts to listen to the ones who see it, even if they're not the one it was meant for. After that night with Mr. Clark, something inside me began to wake up. I didn't jump into anything. I didn't cheat or even text him the next day. I just thought about things. A lot. I thought about how happy I looked in the mirror wearing the bracelet. I thought about the sound of my laughter when we were walking through the mall. And most of all, I thought about how it felt to have someone actually listen to me. No phone in their hand, no clock ticking in their head. Just me. My words. My feelings. That next morning, James left the house without even saying good morning. He grabbed his laptop, coffee, and keys like always. He didn't even notice the new shoes I wore, or the sparkle in my eyes from the night before. He didn't notice, because he never looked. At first, I told myself I was just enjoying Mr. Clark's kindness. Nothing more. But then he called me, just to ask if I got home safe. That was it. No pressure, no flirting, just a man who remembered to care. We started talking more after that. It began with casual texts, then short calls, then lunches. James never asked where I was going, and I never lied. I just stopped explaining myself altogether. Why bother? The more time I spent with Mr. Clark, the more I realized how empty my marriage had become. I didn't even feel guilty anymore. I felt alive. He noticed everything, when I cut my hair, when I wore a new color, even when my voice sounded tired over the phone. He remembered the little things like how I took my coffee, or the way I smiled when I talked about my mother. It made me wonder how I had settled for being invisible for so long. One rainy afternoon, we were at a bookstore cafe. I was sipping hot chocolate and flipping through a novel when he gently touched my hand. "I haven't seen someone look so beautiful while reading in a long time," he said softly. I blushed. I looked down, unsure what to say. He added, "Amanda, you deserve more than silence and neglect. You deserve to be cherished." And that's when he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was slow, careful, like he was asking for permission and pouring his heart into that single moment. And I kissed him back. I won't lie. I cried afterward. Not because I regretted it, but because I realized how long I had been starving for this, for attention, affection, appreciation. James hadn't kissed me like that in years. If I had waited for him to change, I would have waited forever. After that day, everything moved quietly but deeply. Mr. Clark and I didn't make big promises. We didn't talk about the future. We just met each other in those lonely spaces life had created, and slowly, we filled them with warmth. We had our first weekend getaway 2 weeks later. I told James the first was visiting an old friend. He didn't even ask which one. The hotel was by a lake. Peaceful, quiet, and so far from the noise of my usual life. We walked, laughed, shared stories by the fire, and held each other like two people who had been searching for each other their whole lives. He told me he was divorced, had no kids, and had always admired how graceful and strong I was, even as James's wife. "Sometimes I watched you walk into our company events," he said, "dressed so elegantly with so much light in your eyes, and I used to wonder how someone so amazing could be so unseen." I didn't respond. I just leaned into his chest and let his words soak into all the broken parts inside me. The truth is, I didn't fall in love with him because he spoiled me with gifts or said the right things. I fell in love because he noticed the quiet ache I carried every day, and decided I didn't have to carry it alone anymore. At home I had become a shadow, a routine, an afterthought, but with him I was Amanda again. One evening after dinner at his place he said something that made my heart stop. I know I'm not perfect, but I would never make a woman like you feel invisible. I would never choose work over your smile. That night, as I looked into his eyes, I realized I couldn't go back. Not fully, not emotionally, not spiritually. The woman who once waited by the door with a warm dinner, hoping for just one hug from James, she was gone. And in her place stood someone who had finally tasted what she deserved. I don't know the exact moment James began to notice the change in me. Maybe it was the way I stopped waiting up for him at night, or how I no longer asked when he'd be home. Maybe it was the way I smiled to myself while cooking dinner, lost in thoughts that had nothing to do with him. But eventually he noticed. One evening he walked into the kitchen while I was humming softly, my phone in my hand, a small smile on my face. I quickly placed the phone down, but the look on his face told me he had seen enough. "Who have you been talking to so much lately?" he asked, arms crossed. I met his gaze. Calm, steady. "Does it matter?" His eyes narrowed. "Amanda, I'm your husband." I nodded. "Yes, but you haven't acted like one in a long time." There was a long silence between us. James looked confused, even hurt. Maybe he truly didn't realize how far apart we had drifted. Or maybe he never cared enough to notice until now. "I know I've been busy," he began. "But everything I've been doing, it's for us." "No, James," I said, my voice low but firm. "It's always been for you, your work, your dreams, your goals. I was just the one clapping from the sidelines, hoping one day you'd turn around and see me." He didn't reply. That night, I slept in the guest room. 2 days later, I filed for divorce. James didn't try to stop me at first. Maybe he thought it was just anger, that I'd changed my mind. Maybe he thought a little silence would blow over like always. But it didn't. Because this time, I had changed. Mr. Clark, his name is Richard, by the way, stood by me through every step. Not controlling, not rushing, just present. Like a steady rock in the middle of my storm. When James finally realized I was serious, he came to me one morning, eyes tired, voice shaking. "Tell me it's not true," he whispered. "Tell me you didn't fall in love with someone else." I stared at him for a long time before answering. "I didn't go looking for anyone else, James. I just stopped begging to be loved by someone who made me feel like I wasn't enough." He ran his hands through his hair and shook his head. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know," I said. "But your love felt like silence. And his love, it felt like being seen." After that conversation he broke down. He cried. For the first time in years I saw real emotion from him. But by then it was too late. I had already signed the papers. I had already packed my things. James begged for another chance, but I couldn't go back. I didn't hate him. I just couldn't go back to a life that felt like waiting for someone who never came. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Richard proposed. It wasn't flashy or loud. He took me back to that same rooftop restaurant, the one James never showed up to, and placed a simple ring on the table beside a glass of red wine. "I never thought I'd love again," he said softly. "But then I met you." I said yes. Our wedding was small, just a few friends, a quiet garden, soft music. No big speeches, no grand promises. Just two people who had once felt forgotten, choosing to see and love each other every single day. James didn't come to the wedding. I didn't expect him to. But I heard from a mutual friend that he was drinking more than usual. That he buried himself in work even deeper than before. That he once stared at my wedding photos online for over an hour. Maybe that's his way of grieving. Maybe that's his way of realizing what he lost. I'm not proud of how things happened. I wish James had listened sooner. I wish I didn't have to find love in someone else's eyes. But I don't regret choosing happiness. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about knowing when to let go. And giving yourself permission to be happy again. Now, I wake up every morning next to a man who reaches for my hand before checking his phone. Who kisses my forehead before saying good morning. who listens when I speak, laughs when I laugh, and holds me close even when I don't say a word. I am no longer invisible. I am loved. And as I write this, I can only say this to anyone who feels unseen in their marriage. Don't lose yourself trying to hold on to someone who doesn't see you. You deserve more. You deserve joy. You deserve to be someone's choice, not just their duty. Because love, real love doesn't feel like waiting.